over to you. This is your time. We have, I believe, 10 minutes left. Is that correct? Thank you, Graham. It's your time to ask questions of these experts and specialists about how we're going to fulfill our greater responsibility to protect the children in our care. Who has questions about how they're going to go forward and do that in their school? Anyone? Maybe I'll start by posing a question just to get us going. Dennis, how do you propose then, as we look at our international schools, we all go back out to our various locations, what's going to be the best way then, and the policy information you're going to be speaking at your session today, to make sure that leaders of schools or anyone who's sitting here and wants to take this back to their school is going to implement a program? What's the best way to get started?
I would say put your head of school on the spot. Go to your head of school and say, well, first do your homework. Because if you have a policy and you go and say, what's our policy, he's going to turn to you and say, you should know that. But I think it starts at the top. I really do. I would encourage you to go home, find the policy, find the procedures, do your homework, because there's a lot of stuff. I get that. But go find it. Find out what your school has, and then become familiar with it as a teacher or as an administrator. What we're doing in our workshop is what's been very gratifying to me. 5 years ago, do this workshop, and there may be 2 schools would have policies. Now, yesterday's workshop had 18 people, only 1 school didn't yet have a policy. So we're moving beyond that. And I think you need to know what the policy is, and you need to know what the reporting systems are. And then I think you just go through the process in your handbook, what a comprehensive program is. Most relevant to you as teachers is probably the curriculum piece. Counselors as well have an important role to play there. If I just one other thought, in the handbook we talk about what is a comprehensive child protection program. There's no one silver bullet. You have to have the system, as Doug said, of policy, procedures, code of ethics, reporting mechanism, curriculum, community involvement, multidisciplinary teams. It's the system that we're trying to build. And what you need to understand is your role and responsibility in the system as teachers.
Please.
When you look at the handbook, you start with all sorts of internal things. You set your policy, you set your procedures, you train. And only after you're all ready with that do you say, oh, what's the law in this country? How do we connect our school to the country? I would like to suggest that you start upside down. Actually, I think this is the empowerment approach. Find out what is the law and what are the support systems in your country. Because your head of school is still only an individual person, and it takes a long time for them to feel that they're not alone in doing something such as reporting a case. And by the way, you know what, you're not going to have to report very many cases. This is worst case scenario. But know the law, know your place in the community, get out of being in this hot air balloon and enter into your community in terms of the law.
Yeah, it'd be great to have that in the induction program for every new leader, administrator coming to a school, to not forget that. We're so busy when we arrive in the school. We have to remember to look outward. Thanks, Lois. Sherry, the research. In a session yesterday, Dennis commented, he said, boy, there's an ocean of information out there. For people to say, well, what does research tell us about effective practice? Where do we start?
Thank you. I think that definitely starting with policies. Some of the new research that's coming out, some of the latest research on program evaluation for violence prevention really suggests that starting with building level programs is the best way to go. So policy is actually a really key point. something I mentioned to somebody yesterday that I really love as an exercise if you're trying to get a sense of like what the current status of your school is something called hotspot mapping. And so you make some little rudimentary floor plan of your school. It doesn't have to look like an architect drew it, and pass it out to all the students with, well, in the states they use green and yellow and red for the traffic lights, and then ask them to mark the safe places and the dangerous places with the colors. And there was one program that did that had some really good results with that. They found, I was in one school, that the school safety officer's desk was the place that kept getting circled in red, and it turned out that there was a sex offender who had been hired as the security officer for the school. So the most dangerous spot in the whole school was the security officer's desk. But I like that as an intervention, as a assessment tool maybe, or because it doesn't require a child's individual disclosure. They don't have to say why they think it's red. It can just because their friends heard about it or whatever, and it will give you a way to sort of take the pulse of your school. I think even some of the social marketing and things like that, those are actually, so here's a time I'm going to tell you that you can actually do less. This will be like the only time, is that those have been shown in some of the new research that's coming out to be just as effective as some of the more labor-intensive classroom-based curricula that take up more of classroom time to work at these building level issues.
Okay, thank you. We'll look forward to hopefully learning more about what the current research is. It'll be very helpful to, I think, everyone in this room to have a good go-to place and learn about that. And Doug, perhaps you can add, counseling comes up also. Schools, I know here at ASA, maybe you talk a little bit about some of the systems already in place, if any of you need help, or how they would access your services.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I can say is we know that mental health is limited, both in the states and actually and around the communities where you work as well. So we're in right now conversations about how to develop either warm referrals in the community, finding people with what we call best practices, so evidence-based practices that meet the standards that we recognize as best in treatment. The second is developing electronic or distance consultation and learning through Skype programs. And so during the Job Alike with counselors this week, that was one of our priorities in developing a system of care where you can know that if you do identify a child needing help, there is a place to go. And that really is sometimes a quandary. You don't want to ask the question unless you have the answer, right? And so our job on the treatment side is to come up with those answers and those firm referrals that you're confident in, that they'll be referred to someone who is ethical and is using best practices.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from the audience? Lois?
My request is that you help participate in some kind of research of our student body. What are the kind of victimization experiences that our children have? You know, most are safe, but something happens to everybody. And yes, most are resilient and they're fine. I think I'm fine after what happened. I was in boarding school and all these horrible things happened to me, and I think I'm fine. But I think we have to understand the victimization of our students. And I've had a hard time getting schools to agree to do this. So if you could seriously consider, if we come and ask you if you can participate, I want to work with Sherry, who was the author of the Juvenile Victimization Questionnaire, to come up with some kind of tool that would be relevant to our children. So please consider that when we ask you, so you have an answer, good answer. Thanks.
Great. So I'm sure we'll be seeing something coming out from ASA so that all of you can contribute or participate. Graham's nodding, so that's helpful. So this brings to a close our session this morning. Thanks to all of our panelists. And I'm going to turn over to any other announcements or anything. So at this point, you're going to be free to pursue your choices for the day, and hope you find it to be an enriching one. Thanks again, everyone.